Welcome everyone to today's webinar, Caseware Analytics AuditNet webinar event, Business Profiling Using Data Analytics. Serving the global audit community, AuditNet is the primary online resource for auditors to share resources, tools, and experiences. AuditNet has been at the forefront of websites dedicated to promoting the use of audit technology and has now expanded its offering to include high-quality web-based training for auditors and finance professionals. Over the years, AuditNet has partnered with Caseware Analytics, the makers of Idea Data Analysis software, on several events and webinars. With the launch of Idea 10 and the help of its analytic intelligence, audit professionals can find their audit starting point more efficiently than ever. With us today is our guest speaker, Jeff Sorensen. Before I turn the floor over to our speaker to introduce himself and the agenda, I'd like to briefly cover the housekeeping items. The webinar is being recorded today, and you will receive a link to the recording after the webinar is over. The link will be sent to the email address that you registered with for this webinar. You can submit questions via the chat box on your screen. Submit those questions. I'll be moderating those questions and seeing which ones to pass over to Jeff during the webinar. If we can't get to all of the questions, we will follow up with an email. We are operating under NASBA rules, and NASBA does require us to ask polling questions during the webinar. CPE certificates will be sent via email to those who answer all of the polling questions. A reminder on CPE certificates, you must answer all 3 polling questions. CPE certificates will be sent out via a third-party provider next week. You must be able to receive emails with a link to download the certificate. The email will go to the address that you used to register for the webinar. Please let your email administrator or RT department know that you will be receiving emails from GoToWebinar and GenSend. That's GENSEND.io. Check your spam or junk folder before contacting us. Those certificates will not be sent out until next week. After the webinar is over, you will have an opportunity to provide feedback on the webinar. Please fill in the feedback questionnaire to help us constantly improve our webinars. At this point, I would like to turn the floor over to Jeff.
Thank you very much, Jim. I'm actually really honored to be with you here today. I know I've been using AuditNet for many years. I've downloaded a number of audit working programs. But I've never had the opportunity to speak here, so thank you, Jim, for that opportunity. Today's session is, based on the title, it is somewhat lighthearted and entertaining, but it's a discussion about what I consider some pretty serious issues within internal audit, and that is namely, how do we go about knowing our business? You know, how do we understand what our individual businesses actually do? And it sounds obvious and simple, but in the world we live in, I mean, companies are buying other companies all the time, and we're always having to learn on the fly, and there's never really any budget to learn. So what I'm proposing in this session here is basically that data analytics can be used for a lot more than what we've traditionally done in audit, which is evaluating controls. I actually believe data analytics has a real potential to be an invaluable tool for knowledge transfer and for connecting audit more strongly with the business community. But what this presentation here is not, though, if you're expecting a detailed how-to list, you know, here are all the dashboards you need, here are all the sample reports, charts and stories you can use, don't expect the details to come out of this report. This is really just to challenge you and to give you some food for thought in terms of how else we can use this data that we're mining. So as long as we all have that good understanding, then I think we should get started. Okay, here's the agenda. It's pretty self-explanatory here. We're basically saying, first of all, we're doomed. We got to travel back in time. We got to take a pill, fly into infinity. That's basically the presentation. Any questions? Well, anyway, let's go through the whole presentation so you can get your CPE credits, but this will actually make sense to you by the end. We're doomed. What does that really mean? Well, it's a perfect storm for knowledge transfer. You think about it. As I mentioned earlier, we have increasing demands of audit. We're doing more with less. You know, we're merging, we're buying companies, and we're bringing more people together, but we're not keeping the whole workforce. So we have to learn more all the time. We can see that 2015 was a record year for merging, reorganizing, and also staff are let go most of the time. So you don't necessarily have all the people to rely on to help you out. And again, those who are most knowledgeable about your business are either retiring or are being asked to leave. And we're talking, and this is an estimate that's been around for a while, but they say about 10,000 baby boomers leave the workforce per day. It sounds extreme, but when you look at the numbers and you look at the demographics, it's probably about right. I'm saying millennials can't help you. I actually had an interesting study. It was from 2013, and they looked at how many text messages that millennials receive on a daily basis, and they estimated around 128 texts a day. So I sort of looked at the average workday, and I thought, okay, that works out about one text message every 4 minutes. So let's say it takes about a minute to discover, to read, and to reply to each text message. That basically leaves 3 minutes left. But you think about now, that study was from 2013. Now we've got Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and a whole bunch more that'll come down the road. So basically, there's no time left for work. So I'm saying millennials may not be able to help you. People don't stay long in their jobs anymore. And I have another, the next slide will talk about the website Workopolis, which is a job searching site that people upload their resumes. And they've done some interesting work on the data people have uploaded. And now I'm going to turn it over to Jim.
According to a recent Workopolis study of work histories, what's the average tenure for people in their mid-40s and younger? Please select one of these. We'll wait until everybody has voted. Reminder, you can submit your questions via the chat box. Also, if you go to the handouts, you should be able to download the business profiling slides, and in those business profiling slides, you will find the slides that I mentioned before, the disclaimer and the housekeeping. And it looks like a split, Jeff, between 3.7 and 2.7 years. So looks like a bell curve.
Yeah, that's quite interesting here now. You can see no one chose 5.7 years. I thought that was interesting. And 1.7 years was not much at all. A few chose 5.7 years. If we actually look at the results, it's actually 2.7 years. So you think about that, 2.7 years is really not a very long time. And now this is from mid-40s and younger, but mid-40s, that's supposed to be the time when you're hitting your stride and you're really delivering good value to a company. So this is, I think, quite an interesting observation. So if you look at it, basically the 0.7, that's basically onboarding and offboarding. You've got one good, one performance appraisal that says you're still developing and learning, and then you got a second development, job appraisal that says, yep, you're doing a great job, and then you leave. So it's not a lot, and so you have a problem. So imagine you have, so basically you have the only person who knows the business is being walked out the door, the millennial's busy tweeting about it, and there's you left. So you've got this audit, you've got this business that you're not really sure of. What are your options, realistically? Now, you can think of it, everyone in the audience, don't have to respond via chat, but have you ever experienced this before? You're thrown into this audit, there's an area you're not really sure of. So you think of your options, they're not great. One, if you can learn the business via secondment. So secondment opportunities, and not all companies have them, but they are where you are able to work on a temporary basis in a department to gain some extra knowledge and to take that back with you. Often it's not auditors who are doing the secondments, it tends to be people in the business area who actually get seconded into audit because it's part of their training. So if you get that opportunity, wonderful, that's great. Second option, postpone the project until you learn it. Fat chance, right? That really doesn't happen. You know, you got to do this audit and we've got to move on to the next thing. So not terribly realistic. If you can, of course, that's great. But you still have to actually come up with a strategy for how do I learn this business. So it doesn't really solve the problem. Number three, you can rely on the client and do terrible work. Has anyone ever had that where they had to do the audit and they deliver work that's not their greatest because they kind of rely on the client a little too much, and it's not your finest hour. I know I've had cases like that, and I'm not proud of it. Luckily, there is another way. There is something else you can do when you're trying to audit a business you're not sure of, and that is going back in time. It turns out the Daily Telegraph have documented this inventor who claims that time travel is real. He invented some sort of device that allows him to see into the future. Now, I haven't seen any evidence of that. I don't know if it looks like this. This is H.G. Wells. But supposedly it only goes forward in time. And he says it's very, very accurate. Guy is 27 years old, and he claims it'll print out a report that details your individual's future. He has some complex algorithms in it. So unfortunately, I didn't get access to this machine for this presentation. However, the good news is that each and every one of you do have a fully functional time machine in your own business within IT, and it is, of course, your data. When you think about your data, we always kind of take it for granted as auditors. We always say we're going to do our analytics on it, and we sort of say the data is just there so we can get our job done. But the data is actually a whole lot more. When you actually think about it and you pull the data together and connect it from the various departments, all the inputs the company had, all the staff, the money that was spent, the decisions that were made, the things that were bought, the customers we acquired, the transactions we made, the sales we made, the products we decided to sell them, all this, all these inputs, decisions, outputs, and of course outcomes, they're all there in your database. It's just a matter of putting it together correctly. So when you think about it, there's been a lot of headlines. Think of Enron. We had a business which was a fraud almost from the beginning. And they would post numbers, very, very predictable rate of returns every year. And I remember seeing somewhere that they had numbers that were almost identical over a 10-year period. Like basically people could set their clock to Enron and they could know they'd have a consistent return every year or every quarter. So which is kind of crazy when you think about how the economy's changed and how the world changed. And there were people out there who could see there was something wrong with Enron. Look at a company like BlackBerry. Now, they're still in business, but they've definitely changed. I'll bet you if I asked a question maybe 6, 7 years ago, how many people carry a BlackBerry device? I bet you everyone would be carrying one. But now, you know, what happened to them is that if they had looked at their sales by region, if they could see where sales are slipping and where sales are increasing, they lost a lot of sales in North America with the advent of touchscreens and iPhones and Android devices. They gained a lot of business in Indonesia at the time. But really, a breakdown of sales would tell you that there's signs ahead that are trouble. There's risk on the horizon. You could also look at component costs to say multi-touch screens have dropped dramatically in price. They were very expensive at one point, but they dropped in price. So you need to have a product that meets the needs of the people. 2008 financial crisis, I could go on and on and on. All of these really drastic events or fortunes made or lost are really described in their data. So the question is, why did nobody act? Why didn't we see this coming? Wouldn't you like to, as an auditor, be able to tell when some of these, or maybe prevent some of these train wrecks from happening? I think we all know the signs were there, but the key here, and which I underlined, is that nobody was reading the data with an independent, critical eye. And I say more importantly, I think data is fine, but stories are better. And when I mean stories, I mean we need to make something relevant to people. Just having a spreadsheet is not really enough to get the point across. Having some very nice charts is not really enough. There needs to be narrative, there needs to be charts, there needs to be data. So what I'd like to do, in fact, just before I switch to the next slide, I think as an auditor, in general, I think audit really needs to beef up a skill of how to read data critically. I think it's an incredibly important skill set of every auditor, is that when you see a chart, when you see something, that's fine, but what about this? We should always have that in the back of our minds. Now, what I would like to do next, there is a video here. Now, what I wanted just want to tell a quick story before we get to the story. It's a very short video. We really wanted to tell the story using a clip from a famous Hollywood movie, but had we used the original clip, then Warner Brothers would basically be able to sue AuditNet and maybe put poor Jim out of business. So we thought, okay, we'll do the next best thing for a little less money. We have a video that is very similar, reminds you of the original scene. So what I'd like you to do now, it's only a minute long, try to guess which famous movie this next clip was inspired from.
This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends, and you wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill. You stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. Remember, all I'm offering is the truth, nothing more. Follow me.
So let's continue the presentation. So with the red pill and the blue pill, this idea that, you take the red pill, you have to get the whole truth. It could be very ugly. It could be not what you're expecting at all. And if you remember the movie The Matrix, which was what this was based on, that is what the hero there chooses to do, is to say he wants to know the truth even if it's scary. And of course, for him, it was a very scary truth. So looking at business profiling and the ability to tell a story and to really be honest about it and maybe get a perspective that people aren't used to seeing, I think auditors are really the best qualified, and they're really the best audience to perform this type of work. This is not something that should be done by the sales department. This is something that needs an independent voice. So let's talk in detail about what business profiling really is and what it can do for you. All right, so business profiling is telling a story about your organization with narrative, charts, and data. So basically, we need to reach an audience, and we need to create impact and influence. So what we need to do in a business profile is define where we're at in relation to our strategic plan. So what is the company setting out to do, and how are we doing against that, but with our own perspective. There should be a historical view. So we should be able to see that in the last 4 quarters, this is how we progressed. We should have a view versus the industry and competitors. And this is something that auditors are not very comfortable with. We're going to get into this in a lot more detail later, but as a general term, audit really tries to shy away from benchmarking and our competitors and that sort of thing, because we're called internal audit. But I think having an outside perspective or knowing what is normal in the industry can only benefit internal audit. It can only benefit us when we look at data, because going in blind, not knowing what is normal for the industry, actually hurts us as auditors. So it's a very important thing. Now, as far as I was saying, created for impact and influence, is everyone familiar with the 3 I's of audit? And they are really that we need independence, impact, and influence. So basically, audit needs all 3 to survive. Basically, if we are independent, but we have no impact, or we have impact but no influence, you won't get the budget to do the things you need to do. You don't really get anywhere. If you have impact and influence but no independence, then you're really a lapdog. You're a cheerleader, and you're not really performing your duty as an auditor. And again, if you have influence and independence but no impact, then nothing ever changes. You're going to see the same findings year after year. So you really need to have all 3 to be effective in your role. So business profiling is really about influencing our decision makers to make a positive impact with an independent voice. Let's see how we do that. It's not about playing it safe, patting each other on the back, just doing some more charts for the sales department. It's not something we auto-generate and we just throw in the trash. It's not something we only have intentions of using within internal audit. And it's definitely not the same as an audit report. We're not going to issue findings and recommendations and expect formal management responses to these things. This is more, imagine, compared to State of the Union address. It is kind of saying this is where we are at in the business, this is what it looks like. It is something that should spur action, but we're not looking for another audit report. Audit reports have their place. This is not it. I would say to be truly successful, to really create a business profile that sticks, you're going to need some allies within, I would say, I'm saying executive VP ranks, every company has different titles, but basically doing these business profiles is really win-win for everyone. For someone who has a strategic plan to, within 5 years or 3 years, to be at a certain place, we can actually help future-proof that. We can actually look at their plan and critically evaluate whether we're actually getting there or not, whether we are cutting corners. The costs of doing this are minimal to an organization. We might be talking about some subscriptions to some benchmarking data. We could talk about a little bit of training and some tools, which are not expensive. It will make audit a lot more valuable because we can now speak the language of the business. We can now understand what they're going through. We now have a much more in-depth understanding of their challenges. It'll also help us when we perform audits, because once we've done this well, we actually know which areas we should dive into in more detail, because we've already found weaknesses at that level. So it'll help us in scoping our audits and getting better at doing really quality audits. And of course, which is why we started this session, it's much needed knowledge transfer for auditors. It's something that we need to get up to speed. You can see there are a lot of advantages. And then I'm going to turn it over to Jim.
And it is, what are the 3 components of the business profile? Debits and credits, snap, crackle, and pop, narrative, charts, and data. Please take a minute to post your response. Narrative, charts, and data. I think they're paying attention, Jeff.
Well, pretty good. I have the snap, crackle, and pop person. I may have to have a chat with a couple of people, but I think I like the debits and credits. There are only 2 items. So I thought that was kind of funny. All right, thanks, guys. So let's move on. And of course, narrative, charts, and data. We need all 3. Why? Because we need to really speak to people with different learning styles. And also, narrative is a way we can drive, and we can drive people into what to look for in the chart, and what to look for in the data. The charts themselves, the data itself doesn't tell the story. We do need to explain it, but we'll get into more of that later. All right, so let's talk about that. Where do we start with this? How do we really begin this journey? What should a business profile contain? What could it look like? How do we create them? What tools do I need to do it with? And how will this impact my audit resources? Because you have work to do. You can't just spend all your time doing this. So those are some of the questions I'll be discussing. Now, do you guys remember the permanent file? This is something we always had when I started an audit. And for those who haven't used them, it's basically a place where you keep information that shouldn't change. So, for instance, if you're an insurance and you're performing an audit of claims, and you need to know what to do, you basically go to this, and it used to be a paper binder. You would pull out the paper binder, and there would be some flow charts in there. There would be a bit of description, what's going on, maybe some of the people who work in the department. There'd be a little bit of information about what this is all about. I would say if you have something like this, this is a great place to begin. If you don't have anything like this, I don't know how you perform this feature right now, and I'd be curious to hear from some of you. Maybe it'll come in the questions, and that's something I can maybe respond to later. But I'd be curious to hear how you do this, because you will need to know some information that comes out of an audit really is general purpose information that everyone needs to know. You also have information that should carry forward to any future audits. So you've got to have a process for dealing with this. But this is, I think, a great place to start. What's really key, though, is really not relying on what I call corporate folklore. When you document what this function is about, you really should start from the data. I know people can say a lot of things. They can say, oh, this person's a real go-getter. They've built this department up from nothing to now we're making tons of money. That's all great. Let the data tell that same story instead of having, their reputations preceding them. And sometimes, you're going to deflate some egos along the way. But let the data describe this story. And we're going to get into that in a little bit about, how you might be able to do that. Compare your audit universe to the strategic plan. So when you perform your audit universe and your audit planning at the beginning of the year, do look at all perspectives of your audit universe. I mean, you look at a horizontal view, which means all your departments. You've got maybe some product views, some silos, some vertical views, and you've got some matrix, which is a good combination. Try to compare that and look at the strategic plan that's issued by the organization and see if you've got any gaps. Many times people in audit, they kind of think they know best, but really look at it with some rigor there and see, are we really missing any particular areas? Because that's what business profiling is going to measure against, is our strategy. What do we say we're going to do? Where are we? So it's important to get that alignment. Any business profile should contain, I would say, at least 4 sections. You may choose to document in a different way, but these are sort of 4 categories of data you should have. Business context, current period, historical, and competitive. So I'm going to get into each one of those now. So basically the business context section, you are really doing what we used to do with the permanent file. So you are going to define, okay, what is the purpose of this function? Why do we need it? What are the key outputs, outcomes? How does it contribute to the bottom line of the organization? You will have some sort of basic flow chart. Now what I mean is you will need to know at a context level, this is the information we take as input. Information comes from these systems. This function uses these 3 applications, and as a result output we have this much business we create. We put data downstream to these other 5 systems. Basically, you should, at a bird's eye view, know kind of how this organization fits in and what the major processes are. You need to define the relevance to the strategic plan. It should be pretty clear in this particular operation that there is a direct linkage to what the CEO and the C-suite, what they want to see. It should be clear. If it's not, then maybe this is not something we need to create a business profile on. The risk appetite should guide the decisions made. Like anything we do in audit, a risk-based approach is required. So, if your goal is to be number 1 in a particular business at any cost, then basically it informs us that people are willing to take a bit of a hit on their bottom line. Think about it. Like if you, as a business, you're desperate to be number 1, maybe it's Pepsi and Coke, and Pepsi wants to be the number 1 provider of soft drinks. They'll do anything to get there. Chances are they'll sell to anyone. I mean, absolutely anyone. To get there. So that will help, and you will see those decisions in their data. You will see the kinds of sales they've made. Maybe Pepsi is a bad example, but insurance, it's very clear if you've underwritten, if you have too lax underwriting standards, because it'll show up in bad claims. You're going to start to see a ton of claims because you lowered the bar so much, you took in a lot of bad business. So yes, you grew your business, but now you're paying it out in claims. So there's always a delicate balance in terms of what your risk appetite is. And your organization should define this. Someone should talk about risk appetite, those 2 words. You should see that somewhere. Someone should describe that this is what we want to do. If they don't describe risk appetite, it sounds like they're willing to do anything. And that could be an interesting audit perspective, to sort of look at the worst business they're writing and try to challenge them to say, why are we writing this business? It's causing a lot of trouble for us. It's costing us money. So expect risk appetite should always be a real driver. This section stays mostly the same, as you can imagine. Key flow chart, you wouldn't see a lot of changes to this. Very useful, this section, for knowledge transfer. Someone should be able to read this and get us a decent idea of the basics, how things work. Current period is the next section. So what you're looking at is taking those results and then squaring them off against the actual goals of the organization. So if we say we want to lower our cost to a certain percentage, are they doing it? And how are they doing it? What you really want to know is how do they make money and where do they lose money? So, and I think it's a very obvious item here is, what kind of products are you selling and what kind of margins are we making on each of those? And why are we in these businesses? And you'd be surprised what you find. Many times people say, well, we have this business because we kind of have to be. We look good. This is a vanity client. And it's always good to look at those. Every company has their little sacred cows that they have for some reason that's not a business reason. And I would say this is a really interesting section. Define the impact on the bottom line. Yeah, you should be able to say this is what we expect to earn, this is what we got. I actually putting in AuditNet and AICPA here. When you want to know what are the key metrics we want to use to measure the success of a particular business, take a look at audit programs within AuditNet and other places to find out what are sort of the key telltale signs that a business is running well. And depending on the product you're in, and the company you're in, are you an IT shop? Are you a retailer? Based on the type of business you have, you're going to have different types of metrics that really everyone wants to know about. Expect inconsistencies. This is really important. When you perform this analysis and you start using the data to tell the story and not the other way around, you're going to start to see things that don't make sense. And in the beginning, it'll scare you. You're going to look at this and say, how does this make, this is not what I thought. The story says this. Everyone's repeating this mantra. But then when you look at the data, you're going to find things that surprise you. So expect that. If you don't see any inconsistencies, double check. Because there's always hidden little treats in your data that you need to look for. And every company's got them, like those the sacred things that they don't want to, favorite customers that don't make them any money. Those kinds of little secrets are all over. And question, does this make sense, what I'm looking at? And this is really something that's very good from an audit perspective. We need to be good at challenging data. We need to be good at having a critical eye when we see information. Okay, I think that's all I need to say here. Historical comparison, basically, this is where the charts come in. This is where it helps because you're really saying, for high-risk areas, let's take a look at trends. So in other words, we say our strategic plan is we want to be in a certain place. We started here, we're working our way down, or what? And if there's a blip in the radar, by all means, dive into that blip and figure out what's causing it. What makes this different? Because people will have their own ideas of explaining away what's happening. So historical comparison, definitely important. Don't go crazy with it. Just a couple of well-placed charts that shows movement over time and a trend line, I think is very useful here. And again, it's not complicated to do. Competitive view section. Now this is where audit really struggles, and it's something that audit needs to get better at. It is about looking at our competitors versus us in various categories. Us versus industry benchmarks and developments which could threaten our business. Let's start in the beginning here about competitors versus us. Don't go totally nuts here. As the video said, it can be a rabbit hole. How deep do you want to go into this trap? I would say you have your top competitor, maximum 2 competitors, the top, so the top 3 of you altogether. That should be the most you should ever really include in this view. You might have an overall matrix that shows you versus the entire market, and I think something that could be very useful is you've seen Gartner have this sort of it's called a magic quadrant, I think it's called. It's kind of where it shows where you are at compared to other competitors in terms of your features and cost. Think about having some sort of visual that compares you to your closest competitors. The purpose here is just to see if there are opportunities that we're not pursuing or areas where we are particularly weaker than us. Again, you need to use discretion in terms of how much time you spend on this and what you do. But this is good for those, what I'm putting here, developments which could threaten the business. In the case of something like a BlackBerry or where a business is changing underneath a company, and you could be maybe the #1 company today, but if you start to see developments that could threaten this business, you need to start paying attention. And some of the data to document this isn't always from internal. You're going to get benchmarking information that could tell you some of it. There's news, there's articles, periodicals. They're great source of information, and within data analytics, sometimes we forget that there is a thing called Google, and that there's other businesses doing things that could, throw a wrench in what we're doing. So this is a section where we can air those concerns, risks. And some of these outputs, if they do them well, they actually become very useful for the organization. Some of these have already been done by their marketing departments, and you can see some of it has been put together, but I think it's very useful from audit to get out of the internal world and look at outside the organization. So I'm going to turn this poll over to Jim.
Risk appetite should always be factored into a business profile, true or false? Please go ahead and record your response to that. 98% true.
All right, let's keep going. So let's talk about the tools. So we talked a bit about some of the other things you need to think about. Let's talk about the tools. And what I'd really recommend an actual data analytics tool, something that is built for auditors, because just to say here's a spreadsheet, have fun, there's a lot of analytics required. You will need to crunch some numbers. You will need to drill down into root causes. And you also need to do it in a way that saves time. You need to be able to script it. You need to be able to have integration so you can pick up the file from your systems, load it, combine it with other data sources, integrate it, and present it to you. So you will need something that is a bit more robust. You also need what I call smart visualization features, because you don't want to be spending days generating the data every time. The data really should come together almost automatically. You want to have basically a familiar template that you can start from, and then where you're finding that there are anomalies, you should be able to dive in and chase down the exceptions and try to identify root causes. So I would say a good tool should be able to look at your data automatically. So you bring in your data, and you should be able to ask your software to discover what items are hidden inside your data. And it should be able to automatically build some sort of a dashboard with a bunch of different graphs and charts on it, and have some sort of intelligence to look and say, okay, based on the patterns I'm seeing in the data, based on the data types you have, these are areas I think you might want to start. So really, the tools should be good enough to get you started right away. And just to say, well, I got a report writer, or I've got a spreadsheet, that doesn't really meet the need. You really need to take something that's going to get you along. Or you're going to spend a lot of time in tool hell. You're going to just be generating and creating, and you're going to be building a lot of things and not getting very far with it. So your tool really should be able to automatically propose a dashboard and let you start from there rather than start from a blank page. Authoring platform. So this is about the data analytics tool. Authoring platform. For now, I mean, you can start with PowerPoint because at least you can present it. It's something that people can share and use, and you can include links, and you can do, and everyone's got PowerPoint. It works. But ultimately, it's going to be some sort of a corporate blog or some sort of a wiki that you put on with some articles and some links and some items. But the key here is, the repository that you're going to keep these business profiles, some sort of a group where, it's got to be secure. It's not going to be something you email around to people because there's no protection of this data. And you think about it, you're potentially exposing some pretty embarrassing things about an organization or about a department. So it's not something that is sent to everyone in the organization. It is for a select audience. So you need to have some security around this material. It should be able to work on any platform. So if the CEO has got an iPad and needs to be able to view this report, it should be viewable on an iPad. Don't do email attachments. It's just a bad idea. A lot of people can't receive large ones. It should index your content. So your content should be something that you can be able to search and get at very easily. You need to be able to organize and maintain linkages between sections. So it should be something that you can easily refer to. So let's say you have a source you need to point to, you should be able to easily make that link. So shared online repository is really where you're going to end up with this. Impact on your audit resource. So let's start with audit resources because that's really what we're most familiar with. The chief auditor should be a person who's not afraid to rub elbows with EVPs, someone who can tell it to them straight, and someone who basically wants to offer a different perspective. So if you're the EVP of lending, then you should be able to say, I know your plan is to do the following. That's great. We do have some very skilled people within audit that can will analyze your operation, and you know, this is what I want to share with you. We found some things that might be of interest, and they actually a lot more receptive than you think for that kind of message. Audit managers should expect and plan for time in every audit to maintain profiles, and it's just an expectation that if you're going to build this knowledge base up, and it is a crisis to not be able to explain to people how the business works. We need to somehow work this into our everyday ability to perform audits. But what it means is that if you're scheduling one audit a week and you expect to have 100 audits a year, maybe you need to step that down a little bit. And with this work, you should basically be able to understand the risks of each department a lot better and be more focused and be more intelligent about where you put your time when it comes to audits. Now for auditors, auditors will require critical thinking skills, and I'm telling you, I don't know about the audience who's on the call today, but this could be a challenge. Not all auditors are really interested in taking on new things. The fact that you're on this webinar tells me that you probably are interested in learning and growing. But some auditors find this very challenging. They really would just want to do the same old thing they've been doing all along, and that's it. And this could require them to really think a lot deeper than they've ever had to before. Superb writing, communication, and persuasion skills. I do think that that is something that everyone needs to do, because if audit isn't persuading, then how can we influence? And if we can't influence, how can we create any impact in an organization? So we need to be persuasive. And you know, when I'm thinking about it, this whole communication and critical thinking and persuasion, maybe millennials aren't such a bad choice after all. I mean, maybe we can use them after all. As long as they can write over 140 characters, then I think maybe there's hope for them after all. So if you look at the agenda, this is what we covered today. We basically talked about the state of affairs. We live in a world, nobody can help you. The people who know are probably not working with you anymore. You need to use the data to help. Go back in time, leverage the corporate data as a learning tool. You need to be brutally honest. If you're just going to make this pep talk and you're going to make this cheerleading session, it doesn't make any sense. It's going to be forgettable and no one will act. And you'll end up like an Enron, where the signs are all there and no one's reading them. And then how do we get started? We talked a bit about what tools you can use, how to get engaged, what to include in a report. Just a couple of final thoughts. People have found that organizations that apply data analytics for competitive advantage are more likely, in fact, they're substantially outperform their industry peers. So just thinking about and applying analytics to data gives you more likelihood that you're going to substantially outperform. So that's kind of incredible in my opinion, is that just going there, just thinking about it. Here's another one. Companies that inject big data and analytics into their operations show productivity and profitability rates that are 5 to 6% higher. So just thinking about it, just challenging people's thoughts by using data analytics in their operations, which is exactly what we're doing, you could get better results. And that's my presentation. If you have any kind of questions about business profiling, data analytics, or you're just going to give me help for this presentation, I really love to hear from you.
Thank you, Jeff. Just in closing, we do have a question that came in. I think I sent it to you via chat.
Okay, so I'll just read the question here. So it says, I'm starting up an internal audit function in an educational institution. No budget for software purchase. Is there any recommendation for learning to utilize Microsoft products, Excel, access to their best analytics potential? Well, I would almost like to pass this on to someone like a Jim. Jim has a fantastic portal here that deals with audit programs and talks about using different tools and techniques. So, I mean, there are always ways that can be done. I guess what I would say, though, is that be prepared for putting a lot of hours in to use, because Access and Excel are great tools for what they do, but they're tools that are not really designed to do the kind of heavy lifting we're doing. It's kind of like, I compare it to playing golf with a rake. You can hit the ball, but it's going to kind of veer off in different directions, and you're going to have to babysit it a lot to get it where you're going. So, by all means, you can do it, but I find that when it comes to the cost of tools, it's really, you want to know the time savings involved, and if you don't get the time savings, then you obviously stay away from the tools. But I find that most people, when they actually look at the time they save and that they can do more work with the same people, they tend to change their mind. But I appreciate the question.
Okay, we've got another question that came in from Keith. How do I find information to develop analytical tools into our audit program? And I will say that, we do a lot of training on AuditNet as well using Excel, and it is a great tool for data analytics for getting started. But once you get into some heavy-duty lifting like Jeff is talking about, and you're doing business profiling, Excel may not be the right tool for you to use. So let me turn this question over to Jeff. How do I find information to develop analytical tools into our audit program?
Yeah, I think you answered it very well, Jim. I mean, if you're looking, by all means, look in the market. I would say go in the market and find tools that are out there. If this is not the same person as before, right? This is another question.
It's a different person.
Okay, fair enough. I would say explore. Never be afraid to try different options. There are always demo versions available of analytics software that you can try. No obligation of any kind. Register, download a demo, try it out. I'm giving you my information right now. If there are things that you want to ask, you can say, I'm not sure how I would do this or that. I have no problem responding. So I would say be curious, go out there and find out what works best for you.
Okay, here's another one that's in a similar vein, Jeff. We're currently searching for the best analytics tool. Is there one you can recommend? And I will say that AuditNet has a couple of spreadsheets that we've put out there that compare the different tools, and you really need to decide what you're going to be using them for. But there really is no easy answer to that, because there's a difference between a tool and a process. And what Jeff has been talking about today is really a process more than a tool. So I think that you need to look at, getting familiar with the data analytics process and then deciding on what tool you want to use to address that process. And I think it's very important for all internal audit functions to build data analytics and to leverage data analytics as much as they can. There's been a lot of talk about this. I can recall going back probably 25 years where people were talking about the automated audit and continuous audit tools and using data analytics. And I can tell you that right now most auditors are using, most of their data analytics is being done on an ad hoc basis, and they are using tools like Excel. And the reason that they're using that is because everybody has Excel. If you've got Microsoft Office, you've got Excel, you've got PowerPoint, you've got Microsoft Word. So that's the tool that that most people are using. But once you get beyond the basics of learning what data analytics is and what kinds of procedures and what kind of process you can use, then you're going to need to look at a heavy-duty tool such as Caseware Analytics. I think that you need to consider that and some of the other tools that are out there. And there are a number of different tools. And AuditNet does have some worksheets that analyze and provide unbiased information on the different tools that are available. So,
absolutely. Yeah, that's a very good answer. I would just say that if you're interested in evaluating the tool we use is Caseware Analytics, send me an email after the presentation. I'll gladly get you a link, and then you can see for yourself, see what works for you.
Great. Well, I don't see any other questions that have come in, Jeff. So let me just remind everybody, if some of you could not download the slides, if you just send an email to me at webinars@auditnet.org, I will send you a copy of the slides. You will be receiving a link to the recording. That link should take a couple of hours for me to get up, but look for it tomorrow. It'll be in your, the link and the email follow-up will be in your inbox. CPE certificates will come next week, so please don't write and ask where's my CPE certificate. We do our best to pull that information together and get it out to you as soon as possible. So with that, I'd like to close out today. Wish everybody a great day, and thanks for joining us. Thank you, Jeff, for a great presentation, and thank you, Caseware, for putting on this event, and we look forward to more of these events in the future. Thank you very much.